Hello, beauties. Welcome to Moms Unboxed, a podcast where I unbox with you the how-tos, tips, and tricks to empower women to upgrade relationships, intimacy, and parenting. I'm your host, Melanie Caroline, a multi-dimensional woman, life coach, lover, and mom who's made a lot of fucking mistakes. If you want to live a sensual and liberated life, you've come to the right space. Don't forget to follow Moms Unboxed because you don't want to miss an episode. Hello, beauties. How y'all doing today? I hope you're having a good week, and if you're not having a good week, I trust that it'll turn around for you. Now, this week is kind of unique because I scheduled my dental appointment on the same day I'm supposed to record this podcast. So if my voice seems a little off, it's because half my damn face is numb, y'all. A mistake I made that I will not make again is scheduling the recording on the same day of a dental appointment. But that's okay because that's kind of what we're unboxing this week, is having grace when we make mistakes. Now, you may have a young child, but I want you to reflect back on when your child was younger. When children are young, they are learning, they're developing, they're growing, they're learning how to turn doorknobs, they're learning how to tie their shoes, they're learning what it's like to carry a plate, they're learning what it's like to use a spoon, right? So just take yourself back to when your child was younger and they were sitting there trying to learn how to use a fork. And we had so much patience, and we took the time to teach them how to hold the fork, to scoop the food from the fork into the mouth. And there was just this patience and grace, and even we might have even looked at our child in awe, right? Even when we taught our little bit older child to tie their shoe, we took the time to do the bunny ear method and the loop-de-loops, and we figured out different techniques so that they can learn to tie their shoe in the best way that was possible for them. Or even when they're toilet training, being able to have that patience and consistency to teach the child how to use the toilet. You might have even used different methods, like, hey, put a Cheerio in the toilet and have the boy point his urine stream to the Cheerio in the center of the toilet bowl. There's all these different methods that we were able to use in order to help our child. Now think about it. As your child got older, were you as patient with your child learning things? Or even when they made mistakes, did you have grace? Did you have patience? Now I want to say, as my children develop and grow, I sometimes forget that they're still learning how to do certain things. I have to remind myself that my 13-year-old doesn't know it all. He doesn't have it all figured out. He is learning. He's growing and developing. And same with my 9-year-olds. They're learning how to ride bikes or rollerblade or skate. And I have patience. They don't know how to do that yet. And it's when the children are younger that we have this mindset of, okay, they're learning, they're growing and developing, and they get older, and suddenly there's this threshold to learning that we forget. And it's like they turn, in their teen years, it's like, okay, well, you should know how to do all the things. It's like, wait a second. They don't know how to do everything. Now, as I grew up in this very unforgiving environment where mistakes were not allowed, I grew up being the perfect people pleaser because I recognized early on in my family dynamics that when I made a mistake, there was no grace. There was no forgiveness. What happened was punishment, 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 punishment. Take this toothbrush and clean the toilet bowl. You need to sit down and empty all the cupboards and scrub them out. Here, you need to write 1,000 lines. These are the type of consequences that I received when I made a mistake. And so, in order to prevent myself from getting in trouble, I had to be the best people pleaser that I could be. And one of the things that helped me become a people pleaser was being extremely critical towards myself. I became a perfectionist. And now I'm a Virgo, and if you know anything about Virgos, Virgos are already pretty deemed to be perfectionists. But when you grow up in a unforgiving environment and you grow up to be a people pleaser, you become extremely critical towards the self. And that's what I did. I ruminated and beat myself up to a pulp when I did something wrong, when I upset someone, when I made a mistake, and I allowed no grace. And this was my survival mode. And through my own healing journey, I recognized how unhealthy that is. So it was just 2 nights ago, I made a mistake. I, shared someone's information that didn't need to be shared. And it wasn't like this huge, deep, dark secret. It was just we were talking about budgeting and money, and someone shared something with me, and I shared it with someone else. And that night, I tossed and turned. I could not sleep because I had named this person out to another person, and I knew that was wrong. I just couldn't sleep over it. It was so out of my character, outside of my morals and values, and it was just like, again, my teen self just beating herself up for making a mistake. And even within my business, being a mompreneur, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Mompreneur? I don't know, y'all. You're going to have to help me out with that one. But I know you know what I'm talking about. Developing my own business, I can feel that version of myself, the critical self, not allowing room for mistake, not allowing room for grace. And this is exactly how I grew up. Now, this became part of my survival method, like I said. And so in ways, it helped me progress as a person. Like, I was able to get my associate's degree. I had a child at 21. I got my bachelor's degree. I continued to push myself and push myself. But that's exhausting. And if you're like me and you are self-critical and you are hard on yourself and you don't allow yourself any forgiveness or patience, you know how exhausting it can be to function in this manner. And so I was standing in front of the cupboard and I was like, fuck, I don't allow myself any grace. And then I started thinking about, well, what does grace even mean? What is it to have grace? And so then I was looking up the definition of grace. And let me tell you, there are so many different definitions of grace. Grace can be described in the way a person moves, their fluidity, the way they carry themselves. Grace can be forgiveness. There's so many different definitions of grace that I had to really start breaking the word down. And so what I came up with, what does it mean to have grace? I came up with some acronyms that will really help me embody what it is to have grace more within myself, so that I can not be so critical, so that I can allow myself to make mistakes and be okay with making mistakes, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and it is within our mistakes and within our suffering where we find self-compassion and self-love. And I don't know about you, but I have made my fair share of mistakes as a mother. And it's when we lack self-compassion and self-love where those mistakes turn into shame and guilt. And I don't want that for you, mamas. I want you to be able to have grace and self-compassion and self-love. Allow yourself to be okay with making a mistake. And I know this is especially hard for you moms who are people pleasers. I call myself a recovering people pleaser. And that doesn't mean that my people pleasing is completely washed and I'm completely healed of people pleasing. Like, that is something that you continuously have to work on. But part of removing yourself from the people pleaser role is also removing the criticism that we have towards ourselves. And I started noticing a theme. When I met critical people, I realized that they were very critical towards other people because they were critical towards themselves. And I noticed that within myself, like critical people are extremely judgmental. They don't allow for grace or mistakes. They judge. They talk behind your back. Like there's a whole slew of things that come with a person who is critical, because if they don't allow themselves mistakes, how are they going to have the grace for other people to make mistakes? Like there's not going to be a lot of compassion or grace when it comes to a person who is extremely critical or still in that people pleaser role. So if you're a mama who is critical or judgmental, I would like you to reflect on how you treat yourself. And does the way you treat yourself bleed into the way you treat your children? I want to make sure that my children know that it's okay to make mistakes. There are always spilled cups on the table, a broken dish that happens. You know, my son the other week, my 9-year-old, he came to me and he said, "Hey, Mom, I broke the hammock." I didn't get angry. I didn't get mad. I didn't yell at him. I didn't question. I just said, "It's okay, baby. It happens. That hammock is old. Just tell me where you broke it." And he's trying to explain how he broke it. And it's like, it's okay. I want my children to come to me when they make a mistake. I don't want my children to be in fear of me. I grew up fearing my dad. I'll give you a good story. It was my 16th birthday. My dad went to work. It was a beautiful sunny day on September 12th. And my dad had just gone on a rafting trip. Now, I don't know if y'all know anything about tubes, like rafts, inner tubes. Well, the tube, when in the heat, expands. So you have to like let out air from the tubes in order to allow that expansion. My dad called me and he said, "Hey Mel, I need you to let out air from the rafting tubes." I said, "Okay, cool. I've done that a million times before. Not a big deal." Well, I didn't let out enough air from the rafting tubes. And so when he came home to check the raft, the tube had popped. And it's a pretty fucking big deal to fix a tube. It's a whole process. It's a big to-do. Well, instead of showing any type of compassion or grace, he was angry with me. Very, very angry. And, you know, he started yelling at me. I walked out of the house, like I was speed walking out of the house, and he grabbed a thick-ass glass ashtray and threw it at me as I was leaving the house. Now, thank goodness his aim sucks and he missed, because that would have been extremely painful. But it really ingrained in my mind that I wasn't allowed any leeway, any mistakes. I had to be perfect. It just revalidated my need to people please and be like the perfect person so that I wouldn't upset anybody. And I grew up with this. And so I became very critical within myself. as I explained before. You might have a story that is similar. Like in your childhood, reflect upon like how were you treated when you made mistakes? Were you in a home where there was a lot of forgiveness and grace and your parents were patient with you when you learning things? Or was it the exact opposite? Was it more like my upbringing? And so I think it's kind of the worst parental decision to raise our children the same way we were raised if we came from a toxic family. And that's like a whole nother podcast episode, but really, if you were raised with very little patience, are you raising your children that same way? Are you allowing your children room to grow and develop without being critical? Because I tell you what, if you're critical with your children, they will become internally critical and they will one day not allow themselves any room for growth and development or grace or patience or self-compassion or any self-love because they feel like they have to be fucking perfect. And that is just not an attainable goal as a human being. It is within our mistakes and our suffering that we share common humility, and we forget that. Sometimes we think that we are above other people because we forget that we make the same or similar mistakes that another person does. So I broke down the word grace because this is something I really, really need to obtain within myself, especially as I raise these children, I grow this business, I become a better partner for my partner, and I become a better version of me for me because I deserve to make a mistake without beating myself up internally, mentally bashing myself, not sleeping, ruminating. Like, learn from the mistakes and shift, change, make sure you don't make the mistake again. And sometimes we make the same mistake over and over and over again, like being in a toxic relationship or going back to the toxic person. I can name dozens of women who do this. And then we beat ourselves up later down the road because we missed all this time being in a healthy relationship, being in love with ourselves, being healthy to our children. So it's just a perpetual cycle that continues, and we have to stop the cycle, and we have to show ourselves love and compassion so that we can do that same thing for someone else, for our children, for our partner, for our colleagues. So let's break down grace, okay? G is for gracious. Be kind and pleasant towards yourself when you make mistakes. When you're having intrusive thinking, be gracious. Note the thinking. Is this unwholesome? Is this wholesome? Or is this neutral? So when you make a mistake and you start bashing yourself, I want you to note how unwholesome that is. And any unwholesome thoughts are not life-giving. So those thoughts need to be released. And I know it can be so difficult to just release these negative, intrusive thoughts, especially when we're beating ourselves up. But that's when you need to have more discipline over your mind. And we lack this ability. Our mind is a muscle, and we need to work it as such and really give ourselves permission to release anything that is not life-giving. Anything that is actually feeding into our negative self-talk needs to be released. Like, you don't need to hold on to those thoughts. You really need to just be gracious with yourself and kind towards yourself. Grace. R for respect. Respect other people when they make mistakes. Remember that you make mistakes as well. Our children are going to make mistakes. Respect their feelings. Respect their emotions. Too many times I hear moms, including myself, when our children is crying over something like they lost a teddy bear or their car broke, like it could be the first time that they've ever seen a leaf fall from the tree and they might cry because they don't know that the leaf is going to regrow in the spring, and they cry. And our response as parents is, well, it's not a big deal. It's okay. You're fine. And you just completely dismiss their feelings. And I know as an adult, a leaf falling from the tree or a broken little matchbox car is not a big deal to you. But remember, they've only been alive for certain short years, and they're seeing things for the first time. They're feeling things for the first time. They're having emotions for the first time. And so instead of meeting that with, oh, it's fine, you're good, no big deal, it's okay, like you're just completely dismissing them. They're dismissing all the little feelings. And if we continuously do that, what are you teaching your kids? What they might receive is, oh, it's not okay to feel. It's not okay to cry. And that's not the message that we want to be giving our children. So respect their emotions and feelings. Respect the fact that this is the first time they've ever broken a match car, or the first time they ever lost their stuffy. Like, yeah, you did that multiple decades ago, but you probably don't remember that feeling. It's like like a breakup, right? Loss is loss, regardless of how it happens. Loss is painful. And we forget that from a 3-year-old's perspective, that is the end of the world to them. Acknowledgement. Acknowledge when you're not being compassionate. Acknowledge when you are internally beating yourself up. Acknowledge when you are being critical towards your child. Acknowledge when you forget that they're still learning, they're still growing at each level and stage of their growth. It doesn't matter if the kid is 15 now. They're not an adult. Even as an adult, you should still be learning. You should still have grace for your mistakes, because guess what? You're not perfect. You're going to make a mistake. But that doesn't mean you need to beat yourself up. So acknowledge, be aware of how you treat yourself and how you treat other people. Are you being forgiving? Compassion towards others, compassion towards self. Compassion is a daily practice. We have to practice showing compassion. And compassion is loving and kindness with action. Compassion is not trying to fix your child when they're crying over a broken matchbox car. It's sitting down with them and recognizing that, yes, not having your car hurts, and it sucks when something breaks, and I'm so sorry. And sitting with them through that suffering and understanding other people's suffering. Compassion is being tender and responding to your own pain without trying to feel resentful or avoidant. It's sitting with yourself, sitting in your own darkness, and sitting in your own darkness without trying to push it away. So when you do make a mistake, and it might cause you anxiety, it's like, yes, anxiety, I feel you here. Yes, the critical mind, I see you. I hear your thoughts. I am with it. The more resistant we are to those lower vibrational feelings and emotions like criticism, anxiety, the more we resist those things, the more angry we get, the more resentful we get. We get down on ourselves, we start hating ourselves, we start numbing out. We need to just sit with these emotions, and that is what compassion is. It's not trying to fix it. It's being with love and kindness. Christian Neff, she runs the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. She says there are 3 elements that compose self-compassion, and that's self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Self-compassion involves recognizing when a person is suffering, when you're suffering. It's understanding that part of our human experience is making mistakes, is understanding that we are growing and we are learning new things. For instance, when we get a new job, we're going to have those colleagues that think we should just know everything within 2 weeks of getting the job. And we are going to run into those people who don't have a lot of patience, who don't have a lot of grace, who think that you should have it all together. But that's just not the case. They're forgetting their own self-compassion. They're forgetting what it's like to start a new job. So remember this when your child is trying to learn something new. Remember what it's like for you to learn something new. And maybe you had parents to help you navigate life and learn all the things. Or maybe you're more like me, where your parents were completely isolated from you and you had to learn life on your own. Self-compassion is recognizing when people's inadequacies is a part of our shared experience. It's a part of what makes this world not feel so alone when we are making mistakes or we are learning new things. There are dozens of women who have been in toxic relationships, but we oftentimes feel so alone in that. And we forget that we all share a similar experience. And that in itself creates community. It creates the humanity. It creates the human experience. And when we become mindful of our thoughts, our self-criticism, or even the way we are parenting our children, this is when we can stop and assess, well, is this wholesome for me? Am I being critical of my child? Am I being critical for myself? Am I allowing for mistakes? So the more mindful and aware we get, so the more mindful we are, the more aware we get. And awareness is really the key to being able to create change. If you're not aware of how you're parenting, or if you're not aware of how you're treating yourself, there's nothing to change. So the more mindful you are, the more change that you can create for yourself and for your family. The E to grace is empathy. How much empathy do you have towards yourself? How much empathy do you provide your children? Just think about that for a minute. If you are internally critical and don't allow room for any errors, you're probably not very empathetic towards yourself or other people. Empathy allows us to understand what another person is going through because we've gone through a very similar situation. We can resonate with their emotions and their feelings. When your bestie is going through a breakup, you can empathize with how that feels because you yourself has gone through a breakup. Sure, the situation is not exactly the same, but the emotions and feelings that arise from that breakup is very similar, that you can empathize with that. You can have compassion for her. You can respect her feelings and have grace and approach it from just a compassionate heart. Now, empathy isn't taking on someone else's pain. I want to make that clear. Just because your friend might be going through heartbreak doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be going through heartbreak. And you can be present with that emotion alongside her. And same with your children. You know, when your child breaks his favorite Matchbox car, having empathy is being able to be present with that person's pain. And just like I spoke with compassion, it's not fixing it. It's literally being able to sit and hug them and listen to them and notice their emotion and feeling and what's going on, and being able to be without judgment or criticism when they are experiencing that painful event or moment. What empathy isn't is judgment, telling a person, well, you should feel bad for doing that. right after giving them a hug and saying, oh, I'm sorry, but then following it with, oh, well, you shouldn't have done that. Or even shifting blame or making the person feel terrible for what they did. That's not empathy. Empathy is not, well, it's fine. It'll go away. It'll be fine. We can just get another one. It's not trying to avoid a person's emotion. And empathy is not comparing your situation with someone else's situation. And I think comparison is something we do a lot of, especially internally. Empathy is not comparing your friend's toxic relationship versus your toxic relationship and how yours was worse than theirs because ... It's also not saying, well, that sucks. I'm so sorry for you, but here's what happened to me. That is also competing, and competing is not empathy. Empathy is not upsetting people or making them feel uncomfortable. It's not giving advice or problem solving it. It's not trying to, well, let me fix it and let me show you how to do this. And why aren't you doing this? If you would have just listened to me ... Like, that's not empathy either. And we have to keep that in mind when we are raising our children. It's like, are you actually empathetic to your children? Or are you just being sympathetic? Because there's a difference. So grace really is about being gracious, being respectful, acknowledging a person's pain and feelings and emotion, having compassion and having empathy. That to me is like what makes up grace. As a person who's recovering from being a people pleaser and being extremely critical towards myself, I have to practice grace on a continuous basis, because I sometimes get to the point where I don't even acknowledge myself. I don't acknowledge my accomplishments. I don't acknowledge that I'm a great mom. I don't acknowledge that I'm building a fucking business. And I know there's some moms out there who just has a continuous to-do list and then never acknowledges how fucking brilliant she is or how amazing she is that she got through the day, even when she's fucking on her period, she's in pain, she went to the dentist appointment, half her mouth is numb. Like, that's me today. And by the time this is over, like, my mouth is a little less numb, so that's really great. But, like, I kicked ass today. And we have to have more grace with ourselves when we don't do all the things on our accomplishment, or when we snap at our child, or when we make a mistake. It's like we need to have grace for ourselves, because the more grace we have for ourselves, the more grace we'll have for our children and our partner and our family and our coworkers and our strangers in the store and the dumbass drivers that we find on the road. We'll have more grace for them too. So I hope this episode enlightened you in a way and helped you think about some things. I hope it helped you think about the way you treat yourself. If you are a person that's critical or the people pleaser, or, you're not as patient with your children as you could be, you don't have as much grace, you forget that they're learning and they're developing. I hope that you can recognize some of the areas in which you can grow for yourself, and that you can show yourself more love and compassion, because that's just what I want for every mother in the world, every woman in the world, every person in the world. I want there to be more love, more compassion and empathy, because when we can marry those things and ingrain those into our humanity, the world will be such a peaceful place for our children and the next generations to come. I love y'all. I hope that you have an amazing week. And don't forget, mamas, to unbox yourself and live a liberated and sensual life. Until the next time, sunshine. Thank you again for joining me for another episode of Moms Unboxed. If you have a topic or relationship question, connect with me at I am Melanie Caroline. And don't forget to follow Moms Unboxed. May you live a liberated, sensual, and unboxed life. I'll be chatting with you next Wednesday for another episode. Until the next time, sunshine.